while people are still joining in, I'll just do the few intro slides and then hand it over to Mathias. So welcome again to April edition of Stuttgart User Group Meetup. And as each and every month, so you can find all the information you need about user group upcoming events on our YouTube channel, Meetup, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So we have it on all social media as well. So Christian is still not here, so he will be joining us next week because he's still on parental leave. And from next week, he will be also with us again in the sessions. And what's coming, so I didn't put a full schedule, but next week we had a Easter holidays break. So we are skipping one, and usually we are having it each and every Wednesday, as you know. And 27th of April, Mara Pereira from Microsoft is with us talking about Power BI performance. And starting, kicking off May with Denisha Malone. So I will announce the topic and the session in upcoming days on our Meetup channel and all social media, but stay tuned and it will be a great session as well. And if you didn't check, yesterday it was again Data Jazzers, so you can watch a great episode with Will Thompson from Microsoft product team, and interesting things that he shared and insight that he gave. So check it out on our channel. I will post the links in a second. And it's a great pleasure to have Mathias here. As we discussed, Mathias, in the beginning, so your session is currently one of the hot topics in the Power BI area, so everything around Git. So welcome and thanks for joining us for our session.
It's my pleasure. Very thanks for having me. Should I start sharing my screen and then take it from there? You
can fully share your screen, yeah.
Okay. Let me just make sure I do it right. So I don't want to screen. I think it's that one. If you could just confirm, you can see it.
Yeah, it's visible. If you're sharing
VS Code.
Introduction to Git, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So today's session is an introductory session. I want to introduce basics of Git, specifically targeting Power BI developers, Power BI users. And before I go into the details of that, let me just do a very quick introduction in case you don't know me. Here we go. I'm head of finance systems at YouGov in London. I'm running a data management team. I'm running a data management team, and I'm very enthusiastic about Power BI, which I've been working with for quite a few years now, going back to 2016 in total. I'm also the author of pbi-tools, which will feature later during this talk. It's an open source external tool for Power BI, which brings source control and deployment capabilities to Power BI. I think that's a good way of actually talking about today's topic. So when pbi-tools became open source and was made available public a few months ago, I've had quite a few conversations down the line with people saying, I'm not fully comfortable when it comes to source control and Git. I've heard about these things, but it's not something I use every day. And it's an area where I could do with some additional training and introduction. So this is precisely what I want to do here. I'm assuming that there's an interest in what Git and source control is, but I'm not assuming that you have any actual experience with it. I really want to start from the beginning and introduce Git concepts and Git workflows, and ultimately link that into Power BI as well. You can see my screen. I've put a brief agenda here. Basically 4 key chapters, if you will. First of all, Git Basics. How do we start from scratch? Secondly, how do we push what we've done locally into github.com as an example? Thirdly, what are Git branches and how do I use them? And then the 4th chapter is meant to be the main one here, where I'm talking about Git workflows and basically demonstrate what an actual team workflow around Power BI can look like using Git and Git source control features. It's all going to be pretty demo heavy, and hopefully people find it useful. It's a session I've done internally only so far, never done it publicly. So I'd be very grateful to actually get some feedback in terms of what actually works and what doesn't. Definitely want to make sure, you know, I reach everyone in the best possible way here. Let's get started. We are looking at Visual Studio Code here, which always features in most of my sessions. And if I scroll down here, looking at Git Basics, one concept you have to be familiar with is a Git repository. That is effectively just a folder with all files and subfolders contained in the folder, including all previous versions of it, right? So if I open this one up here, this particular page is actually hosted in my readme.md, readme.markdown file. I also have 2 images in here. That's basically a folder. When I look at this in Windows Explorer, this is what it looks like. And that's pretty much, you know, the key ingredient when it comes to a Git repository. There's always the concept of a folder and the various concepts there. What I'm getting when I git enable that folder is, as I said here, all previous versions of my files are tracked for me, and I can actually go back and forth if I want to. Git generally works with text-based files. That's something we're going to look at in a second as well. Files which aren't, and so examples for that would be JSON, XML, MDAX, Markdown, even SVG. Those are all text-based files, basically files you can open up and read as a human. Files which aren't text-based, binary files, can be included in Git repositories as well, but it's quite limited what we're actually getting for those in terms of change tracking. And what I'm going to go through now in terms of a demo, I want to take this folder, which I've got here, which basically contains the full agenda for this talk. I want to enable that to be under Git source control, and ultimately I want to publish it to GitHub so that everyone can have access to it via GitHub later on. The very first thing to do is to initialize a new repository. So I'm already in VS Code here, which makes this very straightforward for me because, as you can see here, this icon is the tab containing Visual Studio source control integration. And as you can see, it detects that I currently don't have a Git repository enabled yet, and it gives me this very convenient button here. So I literally click on this, initialize repository, and there we go. That's it. If you look at this in Windows Explorer, you can actually see that this additional hidden folder has now appeared. It's called .git, and that's basically where all Git metadata are stored. So initially we only had the markdown file and this subfolder. Now we've got this one as well. That's where all the magic happens. You can click in there. There's all sorts of stuff in there, but it's never meant to be used directly. So that's number one. I've initialized this as a repository. I'm still inside the source control tab inside VS Code. And so VS Code now tells me that I've got 3 changes in my current folder. And they are all marked with a green U, which stands for untracked, as you can see. And there are 2 concepts which we need to talk about now, staging changes and committing changes. And that's something which is potentially not very intuitive, so it's quite important to get your head around it. When I said earlier that Git repositories track history for you, one point is really key here. This doesn't happen automatically. This is not something which you get for free out of the box. Tracking history means you have to explicitly tell Git what sort of changes you want to be tracked and how they should be tracked. So this is really important. If you don't do that, you're not going to get anything. You will basically you will remain in this state where everything shows up as untracked. So for that reason, what happens or what needs to happen is that, first of all, you stage the changes you want to sort of record in your history, and then secondly, you actually record them. So from here, within VS Code, I can actually click on the plus button, and now you can see the 3 files which were previously untracked have moved from changes to stage changes. And only now I'm actually able to explicitly record them, or in Git language, commit them to my repository. The letter has also changed. It's now an A for added as opposed to a U for untracked. And one thing you're always required to do is to actually provide a message, right? So basically, I'm now saying those 3 files which currently exist in my folder, I wanna commit the current state of those 3 files into my repository, so that if I wanted to, I could go back to exactly that state for those files later on. So I'm just gonna say, I'm just gonna call this init for lack of a better term now. If I then click here on the checkbox, I'm writing this to my Git history. And what's also happening now, I no longer have any pending changes. All the changes which weren't tracked previously have now been committed, which gives me a completely clean canvas here. Going back to the folder view, we can also see that none of the files are now marked as having pending changes. If I go into this file and change it, even in a very slight way, so just added a blank line here, you can see this then turns yellow, and it tells me that file has been modified. And VS Code knows that because I committed the previous version of it. So that's that. Let me make another change here that's a bit more significant. So basically, I had number 1 in here. Let me take this one in here. There we go. So this is basically the section for the second piece I wanted to talk about. I've added that now. If I now go back to my source control tab, I can see new changes are showing up. Changes are only in my README file this time. It's a modification, it's not an addition. And now something really useful is happening. When I click on the file, I actually get a diff view. So I can see what's changed between the last time I committed that file and any of the changes I've done since, which is extremely useful. The diff view is generally color-coded. When something is added, it shows up as green. When something is removed, it shows up as red. This is basically the gist of what you're getting when you work with text-based files in a Git context. You make incremental changes to your files. You then stage those changes. You give them a message. So in this case, I would say edit section 2. You commit them, clicking there. Then all changes or untracked changes are taken care of, and I've got a clean canvas yet again. That's the gist in terms of starting from scratch, right? So I just had a normal directory in the beginning, made a few changes there, committed them all. One point I've mentioned here is there we go, Git clients. So we're currently using Visual Studio Code in order to interact with our files, which is perfect when it comes to staging and committing changes. But in order to actually see the whole history on an existing repository, Visual Studio Code is not the ideal client. There are a few other applications out there which I want to talk about here. Source tree, oops, shouldn't have double clicked. Sorry, source tree, GitHub Desktop, Git Kraken, Tortoise Git. Those are 4 pretty common clients for Git. So I've got Git Kraken. No, I don't have it open. I thought I had. So I'm just gonna launch Git Kraken, and I'm gonna open up the exact same repository. Here we go. Open a repository. I'm gonna browse to it. Tutorials, Git. Here we go. This is what Git Kraken looks like. And ultimately, all these tools have a pretty similar layout. So first of all, here I've got a history view of all the various changes I've committed. Right? Remember, init was the very first one. Clicking on that shows me all the changes which were part of that particular commit, and then added section 2 only had a single change in one file. If I then click on that, I'm going to see the exact same diff view I've had earlier in VS Code. So I added those lines, so they all show up as green, as new additions. And that's pretty convenient, I think, in terms of looking through the history of everything I've done. Now, let's say I want to publish this and make this available in GitHub. I go, sorry, right. So I go to my GitHub account. I create a new repository in here. We're going to call this Git introduction. There we go. I'm making that one public because I want everyone to be able to access it later. And that's all I need to do. I don't have to worry about any of the other settings for now. So this is now creating a web container, if you will, for a repository, which at this point, as you can see, is completely empty. But very conveniently, the URL to it is available here. So if I click on this to copy it across and then go back to VS Code, I can use the publish branch button and I can just confirm. Sorry. What I need to do. Sorry. What I need to do is I need to add a remote. Paste the URL in here, the one I just grabbed from GitHub. And then I can give that one, which is effectively just a connection, a name. So I'm just going to call it GitHub here. Here we go. And now I can publish. There's one remote connection configured. Clicking the publish button pushes it up there. If I now go back to GitHub and refresh, I'm going to see, here we go. This is all available here. And because I'm using a Markdown file, it's actually very nicely formatted and something you can read through right here. If I click here on commits, I can see the exact same commit history I was looking at earlier. So that's basically how do I get started from scratch with a Git repository locally? How do I make changes to it using VS Code? How do I create a public repository to publish my changes to, and ultimately do the publish as well? And the third thing I wanted to go through, so if we just go back to my agenda, the third thing I wanted to go through was talking about branches, which is yet another concept we need to understand. A branch is effectively a particular version of the entire folder that's being tracked in my repository, right? So remember this folder structure with the various files and subfolders, that's my repo. The concept of branch allows me to basically maintain different versions of the various files in there side by side, and then refer to them and switch back and forth by basically switching to different branches. When I see my repo contents in Windows Explorer or in any other client, I only ever look at one branch at a time. So whilst I can have multiple branches defined, only one is ever active and visible, and all the others are sort of hidden away in this .git hidden folder. And in VS Code, down here, you can always see which branch you're currently on. So this is the source control integration in VS Code. And by convention, the default branch is called main. This is generally what you'll find wherever Git repositories are supported. So at this point, I only have the one single branch in place. I've only ever committed to main. I can also see that very nicely going back to GitHub. Here it says there's one branch in place, and it happens to be main, the default branch. Now, why would I want to use different branches? So there are various reasons for this. The most interesting and obvious one, I would say, is switching to a different branch allows you to experiment, to make changes, to modify things without any risk of accidentally breaking anything that you didn't want to break. So a branch is basically also sort of a safe area for you to make changes and then to decide whether or not to hold on to them. And let me show you what that means with an example. If we go back to the rendered view of this page, let me replace those two images here with slightly different ones, just as an example. But I'm not entirely sure whether I want to keep those changes. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to go here where it currently says main, and I'm going to say create a new branch. And I can give that branch a completely arbitrary name. So I'm going to say large images, and that one changes down here. And looking at the same repo in Git Kraken, we can also see that the new branch is now recognized, and it's actually the active one. And if I then make a change behind the scenes, 1 second, just going to copy 2 files across. There we go, into images, replace, right. So I've now replaced the Git PNG file and the pbi.svg file with different versions which basically have a different size. So if I go back to my preview, we can see this is quite messy now. But I wanted to also use it as an opportunity to come back to the difference between text files and binary files, because this is a really good example here. SVG, even though those are images, are actually text files because when you open this up, you can see this is just XML. Whereas a PNG file is not text-based. A PNG file is a binary file, which we as humans can't read, only computers can read those. And so that makes quite a difference here. So when we basically now look at the changes, looking at the looking at the div view for my PNG file, it basically shows me before and after side by side, but what will happen is that once I commit that change, it will basically replace the entire PNG file I had in place previously with the bigger version. This one, on the other hand, because it's a text-based file, only has one change or 2 changes on the very first line. As you can see, I changed width and height from 96 to 192, basically doubled it, and everything else is the same. And this is something to keep in mind because that makes a big difference when it comes to using Git. Git is designed and optimized for those kinds of changes where it's all text and I'm making very small incremental changes. It's not meant to be used for binary files like this one, and that's not where you're going to get perfect scalability and performance. Nonetheless, I'm going to stage those two files so we can see what it looks like on the other branch. So I'm going to say replaced images with larger versions, like so. And here we go. What's the change I've got here? Oh yes, I added number 3. For now, I'm not gonna commit that. And if we now go back here, we can see a third commit is in place. However, that one is only on the large images branch. The main branch, on the other hand, is still where I was previously when I added section 2 to my README file, right? So that is that's that difference. And to be honest, I don't actually like this view with those massive files in here. So I'm going to just forget about this change, and I'm going to leave that as an experiment and go back to where I was in terms of my main earlier. And I can very easily achieve that just going back down here and clicking back to main. As you can see, main is now showing up as the branch. If I then go in here and go to preview, I've got my original files back in place, and it all just happened magically. And going over here, I can see that whilst the large images branch still exists, main is now my active branch, and any changes I had on the other branch are completely irrelevant now. They just sit in my Git metadata and don't do anything else. So I still have the pending change in my README file, basically the section about branches. And now that I'm back on my main branch, I can actually go in and commit that into main, and there's absolutely no issue here. Edit section 3 branches. Here we go. Perfect. Oh, this is also interesting. That happens quite a lot. Remember, we always have to stage first and then commit. It's extremely easy to forget that, I have to say. It happens to me all the time as well. So obviously, I haven't staged anything here, but VS Code is nice enough to actually notify me and to say, would you like to stage all your changes and commit them directly? And so if I now click yes and confirm, it does the second step for me, and I don't have to do it explicitly. So that's that. And because I defined my remote connection into github.com earlier, VS Code now also makes me aware that I have one additional change to be pushed to GitHub. That change only exists locally, but it doesn't exist on GitHub yet. So just clicking here, sync changes, achieves that for me. Here we go. It's all good now. If I go into GitHub, I can see I've got section 1, section 2, and section 3. Everything exists both on my local machine as well as on GitHub. Let's do one more change in here, and here we go. So because I've already introduced quite a few new terms, I created a little reference table. Let's look at this together. Here we go. Right. So this document is going to contain that table where the various terms and concepts I've been talking about so far are actually all listed with a small description, as well as a reference to some further online resources. So we talked about repository, we talked about staging changes, we talked about committing changes, we talked about what a remote is. Pushing is the term for basically syncing my changes from my local repo into my remote one. We haven't looked at cloning yet, but we've looked at branches, and I talked about branches effectively being particular versions of the entire contents inside my repo. So that's what I wanted to go through in terms of basics. And just explaining, you know, some fundamentals when it comes to Git. The next piece I wanted to cover is slightly more advanced and is about workflows and actually looking at how can I use all that functionality in a team context, and how can I actually work on a Power BI project using a Git repository and also using collaboration. I'm not sure whether it would make sense to do a short break here for any questions at that point. I'm more than happy to take any, but I'm also happy to move on if there aren't any. No? Just having a look in the chat. Someone said, remind me how to define a remote connection. Yeah. In VS Code, if I go to the source control tab, I can switch over here to remote, then say add remote, and then I would basically provide the URL, which I grab from GitHub or Azure DevOps or Bitbucket or wherever I'm hosting my repositories, right? So in the example I've got here, I can get that URL by clicking on the green code button and basically just copying this here. I can then basically just paste it in here and could now create it as another remote. So that's also interesting and important to be aware of. You could have multiple remotes on the same repo. When that's the case and you do a push, it will either go to the default remote, which is always the one you created first, or it would go to the or you have to specify which remote you want to push to. So I'm not going to proceed with that now. Hopefully that helps. Don't see any other questions coming up. So I'm just going to proceed then. There's another question here. If the Markdown file was updated outside of VS Code, is this recorded? Oh, yes, absolutely. VS Code is just my interface to actually look at the files I've got in my folder. VS Code has got nothing to do with the fact that this folder it happens to be a Git repository. So basically, the fact that changes are notified or changes are coming up here is only due to changes happening at the file system level. So basically. Let me commit this one first. So if I say edit key concepts, here we go, because that would give us a clean So I'm doing the shortcut again, where I'm just confirming using yes. So there we go. So now I've got no changes showing up whatsoever. If I then go here and open with, I'm not sure I've ever used, here, there we go. Open with Notepad. And let me just make a very trivial change by adding an empty line here. Once I save that and go back here, there we go. It's now coming through and it's showing up as a change. And I can see up here, I've had one addition, one empty line. So yes, changes can be authored anywhere. It doesn't have to be VS Code. Okay. The other thing, which is also really useful whilst we're looking at that, before I've committed a change, I've got all the possibilities of actually reverting them or going back. Only once it's committed, it's actually written to the Git history, and then it's basically set in stone. So you can see this discard changes icon here. Just gonna open this up a little. So that one. Clicking on that and then also confirming, there we go. So that one extra line I just added is now gone back. So hopefully you see there are massive benefits here. Once you've got the Git repo initialized and basically Git integration enabled, you've got way more control suddenly over all the changes you're making. All right. So let's move on to the 200 section of the presentation. I'm going to paste in a few points here regarding team workflows. Here we go. And now we're going to put all of the basics into practice. So let me just look at this. So what we're going to do is the following. I've got this repo already prepared. So previously, we basically started from scratch. We had an empty folder, we put some files in there, and then we started turning that into a Git repository. What we're doing now is we already have a Git repository in place. We already have some files in there, and we want to make further changes to it. And in fact, we want to do this in a collaborative way. So this is a repository which I've made available years ago as part of the pbi-tools org. It contains AdventureWorks as a data set with a minimal report as well, in such a way that you can basically grab those sources and you can recreate the full PBX file just from those source files using pbi-tools. So we're going to use that, and I defined a project which I've called the 1.0 release, and that one has 5 changes which are meant to go into that release. Remove implicit measures, create some explicit measures, create a version measure, add a new page to show customers by region, and ultimately add the version number to the landing page. So there are 5 changes here. 3 of them relate to the model, 2 of them relate to the report. We're going to assume that we're actually working in a team context where we've got a manager who's in charge of that release and who's in charge of managing the release. And then we've got 2 developers, one working on the model, the other one working on the report. So let me show what that looks like with Git and GitHub and in a collaborative way. So first of all, we're using a a so-called branching model here. And this is exactly why we were talking about branches earlier. The branching model we're using here is so that our main branch would always contain our production version. So main is sacred, if you will, and it's always stable and what's currently in production. If we then set out to work on a new release, we're gonna create a dedicated release branch, which at that point, at the beginning of the sprint, will be in sync with main. And we will then incrementally make changes to our release branch as we're working through the scope of our sprint. And throughout the entire period, throughout the entire sprint, our main branch will not be touched and will be stable and safe. And all changes will only be going into the release branch where we can then basically test very carefully. So that's that. We've also seen that we're actually working on 5 different changes, and we have 3 different people in the team. So it's not going to work for all of them to actually push their individual changes into the release branch directly. Instead, what they're going to be doing, they're going to be creating what we call a feature branch, where they've got, again, have a dedicated branch for one particular issue they're working on. And that is a very common model. And there is also, in fact, yeah, if I've put a hyperlink in here, so if we just go through that, a similar model is actually explained on the Microsoft Azure DevOps docs about the use of release branches. So that's a very common model, actually. All right, let's get started. I've got this folder here already prepared. Obviously, we have to imagine there are 3 different people. So in order to make that a bit easier, I basically created 3 different subfolders. So I'm assuming that I'm the release lead for the time being, because that's where the process would start off. The release lead would go to the repository, which is that one, and would basically clone it to their own machine in order to start work on it. So I'm going to grab this URL again. We've looked at this earlier. I'm going to use Git Kraken, my Git client, and I'm going to say clone repo. I'm pasting the URL in here. And then here I'm browsing to the lead folder, which is basically mine, and then just clone repository. Clone is a new term. Clone means I'm creating a full copy of that repository from GitHub onto my machine, where I'm then able to make local changes. If I click here, open now, here we go. So that's it. So this is what I've got in place inside the lead or release lead subfolder. I can see there are a few changes which happened earlier. In fact, this repo actually started a year ago, 16th of April, almost a full year now. We also had a separate branch where certain changes were pushed into back in March, and this is where we're at now. What we are getting, what we have in that particular repo is actually this. So this is AdventureWorks, where we have a model with 6 tables, 7. We've got some data in here, and we've got just a single placeholder report. Now, me being the release manager, the very first thing I have to do is to actually create the release branch and make that available to my developers so they can do all their work against that particular release branch. I'm not using VS Code now, just to show a slightly different way of achieving things. If I go to branch here, I can literally enter the branch name I want. So I'm going to call this release 1.0. Using the / in a branch name is a very interesting and useful feature because it basically allows you to do nesting. Let me just collapse a few things here. So here we can see that very nicely. In fact, let me make it slightly bigger. So I called this release /1.0, which basically creates a virtual folder structure now. And it would then, for instance, would show release /1.1 at the same nesting level. So I've got that. Creating the branch also automatically makes it the active one. We can see that here very nicely. And I'm just going to go and push this branch up into GitHub. So here we go, push successfully. If I now check that repo here, so it was one branch just a minute ago, and now it says 2 branches, and I've got release 1.0 showing up here. Now, and that's pretty much all I need to do as the release manager for the time being. Just making sure that, first of all, I've got all my issues defined and they're allocated to developers. And secondly, make sure that I've got a release branch in place against which my developers can work now. So let's now assume I'm the model developer and I'm going to be working on items 1, 2, and 3. So removing implicit measures, creating some explicit measures, and creating a metadata measure. What I'm doing as a model developer is I'm also cloning that repo, but I'm cloning it into my own workspace. So I'm starting in the same way. I'm doing, I'm doing clone repo, pasting the URL in here, switching to dev1. There we go, clone and open. And I am then going to open this repo in VS Code. And this is one of the great advantages of Git Kraken. It actually has VS Code integration. So I can literally go here, open repo in VS Code, just confirm I trust myself. And here I am. So I'm now tasked with issue number 1. Issue number 1 was remove implicit measures. So this is basically where auto aggregations are enabled. It's a very, very poor practice, as you know. So what do I need to do? The very first thing to do is to ensure that I'm actually on the right branch. So I'm starting work on a new issue. The first thing to do is to create a dedicated branch to track my changes separately. And I also need to make sure that I'm working off the release 1.0 branch. So I'm just going to switch to release 1.0, and then I'm going to say create new branch, and I'm going to call this issue 1 -dev1. This is a convention I've come up with for my own team. We always put our initials at the end of branch names. That way, everyone knows who owns which branch, and there can't be any confusion. So here we go. So this is super important. Make sure you don't accidentally start any local work. on a branch that you're not supposed to be working on. Next thing I need to do is actually create a PBIX file I can work with. That's conveniently already provided in terms of a command I can just grab from the README file. So if I pop this in here, I'm now using pbi-tools to create a PBIT file. Because we have a data model here, we can't create a PBIX file. It has to be PBIT to start with. And that one I can open in Power BI Desktop, Browse, Team, Dev1, and then I need to switch this to PBIT, open it. It will automatically fetch the data. They're all hosted publicly on GitHub. And then I've got my PBIX file I can work with. Second, this is always the part where things take a little longer. There we go. So just going to confirm to load my data. And should be there any moment now. All right. Almost there. $120. There we go. That's it. So we've got our data set. We've got our report. I'm going to save that as a PBIX file. So I am where I need to be. AdventureWorks PBIX. Here we go. So cool. So now I can go and start making my changes. This is where pbi-tools is going to come in. This is not a pbi-tools session, so I'm just going to, and I've done plenty of pbi-tools sessions previously, so I'm just going to use it without doing much explanation here. Basically, I'm gonna, I'm gonna say pbi-tools info in order to find the file I've got open. What I then need is the process ID here, and then I'm just gonna grab this and copy. There we go. So what this one does is it's now monitoring the file I've got open. So that PBIX file is now being monitored. And every time I click Save in Power BI Desktop, it's then going to extract the internal sources. Because this is already Git enabled, that will allow me to see my changes immediately. So what was it I wanted to do? I wanted to remove explicit measures. They are only in the sales table here. We can see quite a few of those fields have auto aggregations enabled. I'm just going to go to advanced. I'm going to say summarize none. And that's pretty much job done. Obviously, I needed to keep things quite simple here. So if when I now click save, you can see that this is kicking off down here. It's now extracting the metadata for the model as well as the report. When I then go here, I can see I've got a few files which show up as Git changes. They all are modifications, so I don't have any new files here. It's only existing files which have changed. And when we click through those, it's actually fairly straightforward, right? So summarize by was set to some previously, is now set to none. And that's pretty much all we're getting here. here we had a count, which is now none. So yeah, that's literally the only thing which is changing here, and my job is done. We have a few other things in here. So this is just a timestamp, which pbi-tools updates automatically. For this purpose, we can ignore that. Diagram layout. This is just the tables diagram, which had a few random changes. We can ignore that as well. And then here, the database name has changed. And that's also something we can ignore. And this is actually where the selective commit, the committing of changes selectively comes in super handy. Because what I can do now is I can only select the columns, the column files, and stage those, and can basically keep everything else in an unstaged condition, and can now go in here and commit just the changes which are relevant. Now, because we're working against a GitHub issue, it's very important to put a issue reference in here. So the syntax in GitHub is hash number. So if I put #1 in here, it will automatically link those changes to that particular issue. And then I can say removed implicit measures. Implicit measures. Here we go. Commit, and then I can push my changes to has no oh yeah, of course. Let's do that in here. So here we go. So I've got this guy. If I now say push here and submit, then it will automatically create the remote branch for me. So I've done job number 1, and going back into GitHub, I can now see there's a 3rd branch. Here we go. And I'm also getting notified that a new branch has had recent pushes to it. So what can we see here? Basically, release is up to date with main, but issue 1 is 1 commit ahead of main, and also 1 commit ahead of release. So that's that. The final thing I need to do as a developer now in order to complete my task is to create a pull request. And very importantly, that one needs to go into my release. So I'm basically saying, release manager, please take the changes I've made here and review those to go into the release branch. Do I need to? Well, technically, I could link that to my project. It's not strictly necessary. And we can see here I've actually got 1 commit, which is linked to this particular pull request. And that's my job done as a developer, right? So I'm now sort of virtually changing hats. I'm now acting as the release manager again. I've received this pull request from my developer, so I'm now going in here to review that. I can see which files have changed by clicking on this tab. And because the changes here are all pretty trivial, I don't even have to do anything else, because I can immediately see what's happened, and I can immediately review whether or not this is what I was expecting. So in this case, I can go and I can merge that pull request, confirm merge. which means issue number 1 is done, and it's been merged into the release 1.0 branch. Hope that makes sense. Have we had any other questions in the meantime? No, I can't see any. So let me just in the interest of time, don't want to overrun too much. Let me skip number 2 and number 4 if that's okay, and let me just do the version measure and the adding the version number to the landing page. So we're starting back where we were previously, copying here. I'm cloning. Well, actually, no. I don't even need to clone this, because what I can do is I can since I'm still the same developer tasked with that, I can basically switch to this branch. Right, so the issue 1 is now done, right? So I don't want to make any further changes on that. What I want to do now is I want to go back to the release 1.0 branch. In order to do that, I check it out. Here we go. So this is now marked as the active one. And I need to be very careful here, because my local copy hasn't seen hasn't got the remote changes yet, which is why I'm getting this error here, and it says I'm 2 behind. So what I need to do is I need to pull those changes down, making sure that I'm up to date, and this is what's happening now. So basically, I'm on the release 1.0 branch, and we can see that the issue 1 branch was merged into it. I can now create a new branch, and I can call this issue, what was it, 3, 4? Dev1. Let me just double check. Yes, 3. Good. Because I've I'm going to cheat a little bit here. You know, I've still got this Power BI session open, and I know that all the changes I've done to this file are actually exactly the same changes I've just pulled down. So I'm just going to continue here in the interest of time and actually make the second change, which is I want to be able to show the version number for this release in my report. In order to do that, I need to put the version number into the model. So I'm just going to create an empty table for that. Here we go. By convention, I normally call that info. Here we go. And this is just a dummy value, which I'm going to hide. And then what I can do now is I can create a new measure in here, call that version, and then give it the 1.0 version. And if I go when I go to the report view, I only see that measure, nothing else, because the other column is hidden. So this is basically a job done in terms of issue number 3. Once I click save, it's going to extract the latest changes, and then again, I've got a few files here. So first of all, I'm getting my dummy table, the one that's called info. And then I've got my dummy column, but most importantly here I've got my measure, which is pretty simple. So I can do the same thing again. I can basically go here and just do a selective commit, and I can say #3 edit version measure. There we go, and commit that. And then same thing, I go here, publish. There we go. So last time I used Git Kraken, now I'm using VS Code. End result is exactly the same. When I go back into GitHub, I can see we've got 4 branches now, and I need to create a pull request, and I need to make sure it goes into my release branch. And there we go. So here we are. Now I'm putting my release manager hat on again. I'm looking at what files have changed in that particular pull request. I can see we've had a table added, table called info. We've had a column added called value, which happens to be hidden. And we had a measure added to that table called version, which returns 1.0 as a string. So that's what I'm expecting. So I can actually go and confirm this merge. And now I've got 2 changes which have gone into my release branch. Gonna do one final change. So we also see the report side of it. And I'm going to use a slightly different workflow for that, just to give you, even more variety here. I'm going to use a fork workflow. So basically, what I've done as developer 1 just now assumed that I actually have access to this repository, right? I was able to push my issue branches into the same repo that ultimately contains my production code. That's not always the case, and there's another pattern possible where I can go in here and actually fork this entire repo to create a whole new copy of that. And I'm going to create that inside my own personal a GitHub account, create fork, just takes a few seconds. And other than that, I'm doing exactly the same. The only difference is I'm now working with a repo that's in a different organization. So same thing as before. I'm copying the URL. I'm now developer 2. I'm now the developer that's in charge of report changes. I'm going in here to clone the repo, dev2, and as you can see, this time it's coming from my personal GitHub account, not from pbi-tools. But that doesn't change anything. If I then open that, we can see I am on the main branch right now, so I need to make sure I'm actually on the release branch instead. That's something which is always very easy to forget, so super important to keep in mind. And then the other thing I need to do is I need to create a new branch, issue 5 dev2. So I'm working on issue 5 now, which is a report change. I'm developer 2, so this is my initial here. I've got the issue branch in place, so I'm all good. I can get started. I can go into VS Code. I can create my PBX file. We've done that before. Just go to the README here. Copy, paste. That just takes a second. Then I can go in here and open the pbi-t file. Important to change this piece. And whilst that's loading, I'm going to just close all the other windows, just because I'm going to get really confused otherwise. So I'm going to close that one. I'm going to close that one. There we go. And I think this is the one which is now opening from scratch. And this now has an updated model, particularly with the version measure in place inside my new info table. All I need to do is to actually pop that onto the landing page, and then my job is done. And as you can see, we've actually never had to exchange a PBX file, right? Everything was just done using sources and with very tiny changes, handful of files and lines. Why is the table not showing? That's not expected. Did I do anything wrong? Sorry, that was not expected. Yes, I've got the info table here. I've got the info table here. Did I forget anything else? I don't think I did. Let me think. So this is what I've just created.
Had it been pushed to release 1 or not?
Good question. Let's check. There's always gonna be a reason. Right, so this one added the table and the measure. Absolutely. That's where I currently am, right? So, this is hopefully the folder I've opened. The dev2. There we go. I've got info here. That's very unfortunate because I was not expecting that. I'm so sorry. This is that was not expected, and I don't immediately have a resolution for it. Let's just be very calm here. So this is I'm inside dev2. That's expected. I've compiled from the pbix folder into the pbi-t. Oh, maybe I didn't. You know what? I think I know what I did wrong. I think I didn't open. I didn't open the pbi-t file in the correct folder. I opened that one in dev1 rather than in dev2. So there we go. It's all good. Right. There we go. So that's the one I want to open, and that will definitely have my info table in it. Sorry. And then I can complete that change by actually adding the version number. Cool. So whilst that's loading, it should just be a few minutes. Just have a sip of water. Okay, load. And then I'm definitely expecting info to show up. It's it's not showing up here because obviously that's not a Power Query table. Right. And there we go. Got it. All good. So all I need to do now is to actually pull this here, make sure that's a card, and then it's going to show version 1.0. Beautiful. So let's make sure I save that to the right location. So dev2, yep, calling this adventure works. Go. Fine. So I've got that. Last time I used pbi-tools watch. This time I'm just going to use a slightly different command, which just does a one-off extract. So this is pbi-tools extract. I'm specifying that the pbix folder is my destination, and all I need to do is to specify the pbix file. Here we go. So doing that will now do a one-off extract without watching, and then I can go back here and I can see what changes have happened, and we can see we are on our page 1, which is called Introduction, and we've added a visual container, which is the internal name for Power BI Visual. The config file for that one specifies what type of visual it is, and also it specifies what model fields it's connected to. So in this case, info.version. Filters should be empty, and visual container just contains dimensions. So that's what I'm expecting here. And I can do exactly the same thing as before, do a selective commit where I say #5 added version label to first page. And the key thing we need to look at now is how does this differ, because since I started from a fork rather than from within the same repo. So let's make sure I publish that. You can see that down here. So that's done. And if I then go here inside my own repo, I can see that particular branch had recent pushes. And now I create a pull request, but the difference is, and you can see the UI is slightly different, that pull request now goes into the original repo, the one I started from. And that's the point I wanted to make here. So again, I'm selecting release 1 as my destination. The source is this particular branch, which I just pushed to, and I don't need to do anything else. And you can see now, I actually ended up back in pbi-tools. So I ended up back in my original org. I'm no longer in my personal account. And so I'm just going to sort of put my release manager hat on yet again. I'm looking at the files which changed. lost my screen view. Okay, sorry. I'm going to reshare. Just seen the message. Should be this one. Okay, you can hear me?
Now it's visible again.
Okay, sorry. I hope it was just briefly and you didn't miss the last 10 minutes or so. Okay, cool. So I've got the 3 files here. Basically, just added the card.
It's still not sharing. Sorry for interrupting, Matthias. Still not sharing.
Right. Let me try again then. Right.
Now it's visible again.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Oh. Ugh. Is it gone again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Teams is having a play with me. I'm not sure what to do about it, to be honest. I mean, all I can do is, so I'm presenting. That's fine, right?
Yeah.
If I now, let's see. I mean, I can, obviously I've got this sort of red border here, so I'm just going to keep an eye on it. Oh, I think it's gone again, right? I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Let me try. If I share the window rather than the screen, maybe that makes a difference. In fact, can I not do that straight from Chrome, actually? If I do share, Windows. Oh, here we go. Right, let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, you should see it.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. Okay, right. So, no, I don't know what it is. Basically, the second I start saying something, it disappears. This is I'm not sure what presenting. You can see my screen now.
Now it's gone again. So it's shown up for a second and it's gone again.
Sorry, I genuinely don't know what to do about it. That's rather unfortunate, obviously. I'll try once more, but someone says try rejoin. Are you okay if I do that? Yeah, people say I should leave the meeting and rejoin. I'll do that.
If you
sorry.
Try to rejoin and.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'll be back in a second. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
Awesome. Perfect. I'm going to share yet again. There we go. So far, so good. That's Teams doing its job very well. All right. So I'm going to merge this pull request. Nope. Gone. Oh dear. That's very unfortunate. So let me. Could you share your screen, Augustine? Because I could then basically just update the README, and if you could share that one, I could just talk through. Because I'm basically at the point where I would do a wrap up in any case.
Yeah, so if you can share the link with me.
Yeah, 1 second. So just need to update it. 1 second. And here we go. Right. Okay. Save. Edit 5 and 6. Commit. And sync changes. Here we go. So that's going up. I'm going to put the link in there now. Always fine to. You can see my video still, right?
Yeah.
So chat. I'm not the biggest Teams fan, I have to say. Right. So I've just put the link into the chat. And if you could bring this up and share your screen.
Mm-hmm. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, probably not the one we're looking for. Oh, you've got your
iPad on.
Are you sharing from your phone?
iPad.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but it's not the link I'm expecting.
Yeah, that's the
oh, I
link
think
got.
someone else posted a link there. Sorry, go one up.
Just a second. Okay.
Looks, yeah, high CPU and whatnot. Right. So pretty much got through the demo in any case. What I would have done now would be to then basically go to the release branch, which had my 2 module changes and the report changes in it. And then I would have merged that into main and would also have created an explicit release on that repo. And that would have allowed me to recompile the PBX file and actually publish it with all those changes. Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, just a second.
Okay.
Again, lost it. So it's Teams is having an issue, seems to me. Just a second again. So do you see it?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thanks very much. So if you don't mind scrolling down to number 4. So this is basically what I've shown. I've talked about the release branch model. I've demoed what it looks like in terms of basically division of labor between it within the team. If you could scroll down to number 5, I just put some pointers in here for more advanced topics that either I could pick up at some point or people could look into. Git LFS, Git Rebase, Git Stash, Git submodules, Git Cherry Pick. Those are all pretty obscure concepts, but if you want to be an advanced Git user, those are things you want to be familiar with. And then the next thing that would naturally follow here would be deployment automation, which I actually happen to have, which I've done quite a few talks about already using pbi-tools for CI/CD. Obviously, what we've looked at now was just going between my local workspace and GitHub. We haven't looked into automating deployment, and that would actually fit in here quite nicely. And then the next section, 6, has a bunch of references, which I would really recommend people to look at if you're interested in learning more. for instance, under books and tutorials, the Pro Git book and the Atlassian Git tutorials are extremely good walkthroughs and explanations of Git concepts and features. The various Git GUIs I've mentioned are listed here. And then there are some sections talking about branching strategies. Daniel on the Tabular Editor website has a nice article there. Azure DevOps docs have a really extensive article about Git branching. GitHub has got something they call GitHub Flow. So at the end of the day, there are different methods and workflows out there that different people and companies have come up with, and it's about sort of choosing what works best for you. What I've shown, where you basically have the have a release branch that's your staging area for a release in development, is what I'm using in my team, and I'm very happy with that. But there are other approaches out there. I also put some pbi-tools references in here. The second link, which says pbi-tools videos/presentations, points to a YouTube playlist, which I'm keeping up to date, containing all publicly available presentations. Lots of them actually DevOps and deployment focused. And then at the very end of that page, which again is already live, so anyone can basically go to that link on GitHub, is just a summary of the various terms we've gone through and introduced here. Yeah, so I hope that's useful, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Obviously, I don't seem to be able to do any screen share at the moment.
Teams is behaving weird, so kicked me out 2 times now. So unfortunately,
it's that time of the day.
Yeah.
Right. Any someone posted a video there. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I think the last one I don't know that you cover is how do we identify changes creating a new version? Can we set it up?
How do we identify changes? Well, I mean, so the workflow I've just demoed basically showed you state changes as they happen, right? So whoever's in charge of the release basically looks through every single change as they come in. At the end of the process, when you then end up merging back into main, you get a consolidated merge commit, which basically contains all the changes from that release going into main. And looking at that, and in an ideal world, obviously, I'd be able to share my screen now. That shows you everything that's actually changed from the previous version to the current one, right? So I guess the answer is you almost get that for free if you follow the right process.
If you have any idea, any additional questions for Matthias, feel free to unmute or post it in the chat. But although we had screen sharing issues and connection issues, I think, Matthias, the session was really informative and great, and really packed with new informations. So I think at least I enjoyed it really a lot.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, as I said before, I'm really keen to improve this session moving forward. So if anyone wanted to reach out offline, that'd be much appreciated. Definitely want to make sure I sort of address the right points in the right way.
Okay, if no questions additionally are coming, so yeah, no questions, but thanking you a lot. Brian is thanking you a lot about his new knowledge about Git.
Brilliant. Cool. Yeah, that's precisely what we wanted to achieve. Awesome. Thanks very much. And yeah, sorry about team hiccups.
No problem. As somebody wrote earlier, it's not an issue. It's simply a daily life of all of us.
Yes, very sad, but true.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. So from a user group perspective, only next week we are on holidays, and week after that you can still join us. And Matthias, hopefully, if you have a new version of this one, it would be interesting to host you again whenever you have time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. I'm